BNP Paribas, partenaire des plus belles histoires de Roland-Garros, aux côtés des ramasseurs de balles depuis plus de 50 ans.
Yeah, you know, I think I was challenged a lot, and my opponent today was coming up with some really good shots, and I did a good job kind of sticking it out and just trying to do my best and weather the storm when she was hitting winners and hitting a lot of big serves. So, yeah, I think just trying to ride out the wave.
Questions, please.
I'm from the Dutch news agency ANP. Can we consider you also a little bit like a Dutch player?
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, my grandmother is from the Netherlands. On my mom's side as well, we have a lot of Dutch history too. So, you know, the Netherlands is a place that feels like a second home in a lot of ways, just because of that heritage. And to get to go there this year to play the tournament, I'm really excited. It's a tournament that I haven't played in before. I think one of my good friends on tour, Allison Risk, won this tournament and really enjoyed being there. So this was a bucket list tournament that I wanted to get to play before I retire. So I'm really excited about going. I have a lot of friends and friends that are like family in the Netherlands. So it makes it really special to be able to go there and compete this year.
Is it the first time you will play in the Netherlands?
Yeah, the first time playing there. I've visited many times, and it's one of my favorite places to travel to. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Danielle. I wanted to ask you about the thing with the cameraman in Strasbourg. How do you look to the safety of female players these days? Also because of some incident recently concerning obsessive behavior.
Yeah, I think those are two separate issues. I think what happened in Strasbourg is just me asking for personal space at my workplace, and I don't know, you know, why that is even a topic of discussion, frankly. I mean, it should be something that we can get to have during like our work. And the fact that I've had to ask so many different times, like in my career and during different matches, to just have an adequate level of personal space, I think is kind of strange. And, you know, I think oftentimes it seems like my response is treated like the offense itself, you know, and I'm learning that as a female, asking for personal space seems to be an issue for a lot of people. And I think it's really pathetic, honestly, that it's even a topic of discussion, and it's something that over time there's been no one that's been able to kind of make the adjustment. You know, in the video, there's so much that people don't see. They don't see the person go and stand right on top of Emma to get a good shot of me in about a 2 to 3 foot space. That's just, I'm doing a performance job. I'm trying to focus on my work. I'm trying to maintain my focus and concentration. It's my job requires channeling physical, emotional, and then logical, right, things going on. And it's my job to try to put that all together. And the last thing that I should be focusing on is someone that's right on top of my opponent and, you know, right in my face. It's just, it's really unnecessary too, especially with the capability that we have with technology. I mean, I feel like we can get a good shot and maybe like have, you know, a little bit more distance between each other. But to go off of what you're saying, I think the other thing is a separate issue. I think that man was trying to do his job, but where do you draw the line, right? You know, I don't necessarily think that it was creepy, but I think we should all be able to say, hey, like, I would like some physical space, but you know, you go to different tournaments and you ask nicely most of the time, you ask politely, that doesn't get reported on. But the time I'm like, hey, I, you know, get upset about it, that response is treated as the offense itself. And that's what I find most interesting about it.
Danielle, we had the president of the FFT talking this morning about scheduling again, because once more it's all men's matches at night. It's often the first 2 matches of the day on the main courts are women's matches, and he said it was basically because they think it'll be better matches for the spectators to have kind of men's matches at the end. I just wondered what you make of those comments, and just generally the scheduling as it is here.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't put a lot of thought into the scheduling because I'm always just focused on trying to show up and do my job and do it the best as possible. But I do think there's a lot of benefits to having, you know, the women on and during the night matches. We attract a lot of fans, a lot of crowd. We create a lot of discussion around the game overall, right? And, you know, I think there's certainly value there having us on the night schedule as well. So I think it's, yeah, probably a little out of the ordinary compared to some of the other events, right? I mean, that's all I can really say. I don't know exactly what he said, so I'm sorry.
Just to follow up on that a bit, Iga asked Iga about it after his comments as well, and she was saying sort of that she's just mostly focused on the tournament, doesn't try to worry too much about that sort of stuff. And you sort of said similar. I mean, like how do you sort of feel about the balance of staying focused on your own career while still trying to advocate and stick up for yourself, which maybe you were talking about a bit in the Strasbourg answer as well, but just sort of how to balance, you know, keeping your mind in the game while also still having that sort of, whether it's advocacy or just needing to stand up for yourself or for women more largely.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think sometimes when we're playing in events, you know, obviously there's a lot for us to focus on as athletes, and I think, you know, that can be hard to understand for, you know, people that maybe haven't played the sport. And so, you know, yes, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to get the opportunity to do what we do. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's going to always be little things that the tournaments, the tours can always improve on. And, you know, I do think it's a hard thing for us to balance because at the end of the day, we're performers. We're trying to do our job on court first, and that requires a lot of concentration. And honestly, the second you step away from the court, it requires so much concentration. And sometimes having these conversations, I think, can be distracting, especially if you get sucked into kind of a negative narrative that isn't intended to be. And so I can see why players are probably hesitant to sometimes speak on different matters, because we're all just trying to do our best at the end of the day. And unfortunately, you can, if you make just like a comment about a preference, like you can be labeled as a brat, or like you have to be so careful with everything that you say and how you say it. Otherwise, it just can get taken out of context. And I do think that there's a lot of women on tour that are probably uncomfortable to sometimes speak on different issues because of the way that can kind of happen. You know, and maybe too, you know, it's also a sign of maturity from some players to try to handle things, you know, internally. I think that can be a better tact in certain instances. But yeah, I think it's a little bit more challenging sometimes for the women to be able to voice their opinions, because we really get hammered when it's not in alignment with, you know, what the public views and what other people's feelings are on the matter. So.
Two last questions.
Danielle, congrats to win. Your next opponent is Olga Danilovic. What would you say is the toughest challenge playing her, and what do you recall from last year's match?
Yeah, we've had two very close matches, two very long battles. Olga is a big hitter, obviously, a great athlete. So I'll really have to bring my A game and really just, you know, focus on playing my game style, executing that well. And, you know, I think just being ready to adjust to kind of the different angles and the different spins that sometimes come from playing a lefty. But luckily, I've been practicing with some lefties in the last few weeks, so hopefully I can use that to my advantage.
Last question, please.
Hi, Danielle. I don't know exactly how to put this, but in this press conference and also for many years, you've had this wonderful quality of going forward, of speaking your mind, sometimes in terms of gender, but usually then in a very nuanced but very candid way. Could you talk about that, how that's developed? Is that something you're proud of, your voice and so forth? If you could reflect on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big goal for me is to, be honest, to answer questions thoughtfully, to enter these conversations with intention, and to offer some substance, right, to what we're all talking about, because otherwise I would just put people to sleep. And I feel like, at the end of the day, everyone's doing their job by asking questions and, creating conversation around tennis. And I think there can be a lot of benefit to having conversation about tennis, even when the conversation's difficult, even when it can be challenging, even when it can ruffle feathers. I do think there's benefit there. And that's something that I feel like I can contribute to in a positive way on tour, is creating a lot of discussion and different various topics and opening that up, because I am an open person. So, I feel like for me, I'm comfortable in my own skin. So I'm able to kind of enter these, conversations, I think, with a little bit more ease. But yeah, I do think there, I can understand why it can be challenging for some of the other players as well. I don't think people understand how difficult, it can be sometimes being a public figure and having to be on all of the time, and especially as women, it's like we have a lot of standards we're held to, and being perfect all the time, having the perfect response, having the perfect attitude, having the perfect emotions, having the perfect life, right? And it's just not realistic. And so I've tried to be open about, the good, the bad, the ugly, my challenges, triumphs, right? And just offer some substance to people. So
if I could just briefly ask, have you gotten support from the locker room, or is there some not so supportive?
I feel like in general, one of the things I'm most proud about in my career is the friendships that I've made. I don't think that everybody gets to see that because we're competing so hard on the court, and obviously I am a competitor first and foremost. But some of the close bonds and friendships that I have with different players that people maybe wouldn't expect. And, I feel like for the most part, I've been supported, and I feel like, I give the girls sometimes some things to laugh about, and we have inside jokes because of things that I've done or things that I've said, and we poke fun at each other and are able to laugh. And, so I think generally it's been pretty positive for the most part.